Hello, and welcome to today's devotional. This is Jack Heineke. Today's scripture will be from the book of Revelation, chapter 21, verse 4. And he will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and there will no longer be death, there will no longer be sorrow and anguish or crying or pain, for the former order of things has passed away. I received news right before bed last night of the death of a young man I came to know in my community. He and his family were on my mind before falling asleep last night and were on my mind upon waking this morning. I feel tremendous sorrow for his mother and father and siblings and his many, many friends. These unexpected tragic losses of people at such a young age always rocks me. It always leaves me with that unsettled sense that death leaves and the darkness makes everything less enjoyable, less bright, just less fun. I'm at that age where death is more likely and more inevitable. And he was nowhere near my age. He was an extremely well-liked guy who liked to have fun and liked to be the life of the party. He truly cared for the well-being of his family and friends, and like all of us, he tried to hide his inner darkness that most people won't discuss, let alone let anybody see. But if you know of your own internal darkness, you can see it in others, no matter how hard they try to hide it. And knowing your own darkness makes recognition of it easier, and therefore easier to confront in yourself and in others. But when death happens, pretense is washed away, or it should be washed away. I can't imagine the terrible darkness that must be engulfing his mother and father and family right now, as this beautiful bright morning must be hell for them. They will be forced to face what no parent should be forced to face, but too many parents do. And what they are experiencing right now, and will be for all the rest of the days of their lives, is the exact fear that most parents share. These people will need attention, prayers, and help not just for the next week or two, but for all the days of their lives. Because for them, this loss will always be there. They may in time be able to get back to living, but that darkness of this loss will follow them like a dark cloud and will constantly remind them of this horrible, tragic death. I hate death. I hate the loss of someone who was loved by me suddenly just not being here anymore. And I know it'll happen to all of us. It'll happen to me, my family, my friends, and even my kids, obviously. I watched my dad take his last breath in June of 1996. I watched my mom take her last breath in October of 2002. And I've experienced the losses of many people, as most of us have. And although I've come to learn and understand the importance of death for life to continue, I still hate it when it's someone I've come to know, like, and love. God hates it too. God did not create death itself, but created the condition for death to emerge. Death was the consequence if man sinned. And God, knowing man's choice of sin before man sinned, knew that death would become part of our life experience. An unwelcome dark part of our experience that we can never really wrap our minds around or come to terms with. We can never be okay with death because it's not in our DNA to do so. In God's original creation, in that blueprint, God created man without the ability to handle death, as man was created to be eternal. This is why death should wipe away all pretense, because when we are experiencing this horrible intrusion, no mask that we put on is sufficient to express our intense, raging, painful emotions. And this is not a time to pretend anything, especially that we are okay when that's the last thing we are. Ask Job if his righteous faith in God, if that very faith made the deaths of all his children okay. It most certainly did not. Job was in so much pain and anguish that he took broken pieces of pottery to slice away at his flesh. Job became a cutter because the pain that was forced upon him was so excruciating that he needed some kind of diversion from its relentless assault. We tell ourselves that we can handle everything. How many times have you heard somebody trying to face addiction or some other major issue in their life, and they tell people, or people tell them, "You got this, I got this." Guess what? None of us got anything. Not when it comes to things in life that are bigger and badder than us, and death is definitely one of those things. For no one is big and bad enough to face the death of their child or children and walk away victorious, if we can even walk at all. So what would I say to this young man's parents that would actually help them in this dark, desperate time? Nothing. There are no words that will settle this unwanted, tumultuous disturbance they are experiencing. And I'm sure they could wish it away if they could, pray it away if they could. So I would pray for them, and although I've never met them, I hope I'd have the courage to tell them that I love them, and I would leave it at that as far as words spoken are concerned. But I am and will remain in prayer for these people, because God knows this pain intimately. This God became a man of sorrows and was extremely acquainted with grief. This God wept convulsively at a friend's funeral, although he knew what miracle he was going to perform by raising Lazarus from the dead. This God became sin and died in all of our places so that we would have a hope beyond this life. This God promised that he was going to his Father's house, where there are many mansions, to prepare a place for us. And there is no other hope for this young man who tragically left us way too soon, or for any of us other than what Jesus accomplished. The world has its opinions on us Christians, on the Bible, on Jesus, on God, but you can take those opinions and throw them in the trash where they belong. Those opinions are as welcome as death is. There is an empty tomb on the outskirts of Jerusalem, and that empty tomb is our only hope, because that empty tomb points right to this passage from the book of Revelation, when this most beautiful moment occurs right after the great white throne judgment, where death, hell, Satan, and his followers will all be cast into the lake of fire. It is then that he will wipe away every tear from our eyes. And from that moment on, there will be no more death. The experience that we have on this earth of sorrow, anguish, crying, and pain will no longer be an unwelcome, unwanted visitor in our lives, because the former old way of being will be no more. Does this sound like a fantasy? Sure it does. But if it is, it's got to be the most complex, elaborate fantasy ever concocted in all of human history. Can anyone prove it's real or fantasy? Nope to both. You can't prove anything that requires faith to approach it, let alone hold it for yourself. And by the same token, the naysayers cannot disprove it either. But nevertheless, holding it from myself is exactly what has happened in me. Or rather happened to me, because for some reason that's beyond my comprehension, this God has quite literally grabbed my attention and has bestowed upon me some level of actually understanding these words that I believe he gave people to express, to learn from, to teach one another, and most importantly, to live. For these words in his word are the only words that can bring comfort to this young man's parents, family, and friends. What would the unbelievers have to offer them? Nothing. What do those who believe have to offer them? Everything.